Okay, it's day 223. I'll get to Carter Page's letter to the House Intel Committee in a second that just came out. But first, I wanted to talk about Craig Murray and what exactly Craig Murray said, so we get it exact what he said in front of the Ecuadorian embassy about the thumb drive when Trish asked him about the thumb drive. He said, and this I can't play it because I don't want to get a copyright strike. This is Jason's channel, but the what he said was no, George Webb was wrong. It wasn't in the back by the bins. It was there was no thumb drive. There may have been a thumb drive, but I didn't have it. So this is what I love about journalism and kind of priming the pump and doing an action and even being wrong. Somebody corrects you, right? And so if he hadn't seen it, he wouldn't be correcting the group. But then the next thing he says is, but I did have authorization. Authorization means from a government. Authorization means from an intelligence service, meaning there's a password or some kind of code associated with a thumb drive. I'm saying that's an intelligence service by DIA, which is Five Eyes, because Craig Murray is a member of the British intelligence services, or at least was, not a member of the CIA. So now getting on to Carter Page's big, well, first I'll cover Paul Sperry. Paul Sperry says, he's a key contact here in the Washington, D.C. area about intelligence matters. He says there's 7 potential different known sources or assets for FBI, CIA in the Trump campaign. We know about Steele and Dearlove. We know about Halper's farm, and then his assistant. We know about Joseph Mifsud, which is kind of the catch-all for Europe with his Maltese university. He's going to have Russians there. He's going to have Ukrainians. He's going to have Greeks. He's going to have everybody, Italians, etc. Anybody who can't get a passport to come into the UK, basically, is going to be Mifsud's team. I believe the DNC hacking, both the DNC and the DCCC, will actually end up happening from either Malta or from Cyprus when it's all said and done. Then Alexander Downer's got 2 different countries down there, ACIS and GCSB, the different intelligence and services for ANZAC, the Australians and the New Zealand's. Then, of course, Nellie Orr's got her team over here in Centreville, I believe. And then, of course, Daniel Jones has his team up on Capitol Hill, which is at the Senate with Feinstein. And I think the Iwans are going to end up working under Pelosi and Feinstein and Daniel Jones when it's all said and done. Is Daniel Jones Chef Tuan? Is he the new Chef Tuan? It was Anthony Weiner, the old Chef Tuan. Well, we really don't know yet. But we're going to get there. So here we go. Carter Page, if you hadn't seen the post about Paul Sperry, he basically says, no one ruined my life. And then, of course, he then just wrote an article called The FBI Ruined My Life. Unlike my friend, Chris Stevens. This is Ambassador Chris Stevens. This, to me, when you say you're the friend of an ambassador who's in arms negotiation for Northern Africa, to me, it means that you went down and you made a lot of trips down there. You were a go-between for Chris Stevens. And that takes us back to 2010 and 2011, 2012. Now, I sat through the whole trial with the diplomatic security services. And I'm just going to say all the guys that came from diplomatic security services were all these kind of Navy guys, Navy intel guys. And we'll get to it. Let's get to the letter real quick. He writes a letter to Conaway, who's running the. I guess Conaway is still the person running the Intel Committee, not Devin Nunes, which is surprising. Conaway was the temporary replacement while Schiff did an ethics thing on Nunes. But anyway, you'll see here he references in his letter, Christopher Stevens. Now, I think this is what's called a cover letter. When your cover's blown, you grasp and scratch to try to keep your cover. So this is kind of the gurgling of Carter Page's cover here. But let's go to drill down again. Forget what people say, but drill down on his resume a little bit. And you're going to find it's going to be a very Navy intel oriented, as I've said, top 10 scholar. Goes right into the Senate Armed Services Committee, right to the Senate. And then he talks about SDI. Well, the SDI is really code words for brilliant pebbles. SDI can be used, this kind of pulsing laser that's driven by a small nuclear device, can be used for drilling in the oil business, or it can be used for tunneling in the mining business. So this is a key, I believe, a key technology that's been exfiltrated out of the United States through our national laboratories to different folks. You're going to find a lot of it in, I believe, in safekeeping in London or thereabouts, in Kew, specifically at the National Archives. But that's just what I'm saying for right now. And then they exfiltrate a little bit of technology to the Russians to do these different mining and oil projects. So that's where I believe Carter Page's actual expertise lies, in using this it's kind of a secret technology, although I showed a picture of it in the last, or a couple of days ago. It was that train-mounted system, but it can be mounted in many different ways on a rail car, etc. So anyway, he goes into the transition team. He goes right into arms control, 1993 to 95. I believe this is working directly for Madeleine Albright as in her undersecretary position to Christopher Stevens, to not the Christopher Stevens that goes to Libya, but Ambassador Stevens. And then it's nuclear affairs. It's exactly what I said. It's the Brilliant Pebbles, nuclear affairs. He then goes on to this frigate. He's working in Navy intelligence in where? Morocco. UN peacekeeping. And then he has about, 1 year in Eurasia, a lot of years on Council on Foreign Relations. This is basically, I think he's being loaned out to oil fields right here. And then you have, or oil and gas or mineral, different things. And then he gets into the paperwork side of the business, which is he's going to be in London for 4 years. Then he's going to be in Moscow for 4 years, and now currently New York. These are all compromise operations. These are all Andy McCabe, Deripaska compromise operations with Prevezon Capital, Gubarov, and all the gang we know from Sherbank with Vexelberg and just the whole gang, Friedman and Oven, and just the whole gang that we've come to know so well and love so well at Sherbank. So you can see here that Carter Page is very well connected to this arms and weapons business. We know in Libya, for instance, that the person who was spinning uranium before this technology was transferred to Iran was Gaddafi. So we're set right around 2005 here. It gets transferred to that uranium spinning and yellow cake spinning from Africa especially gets transferred to Iran, somewhere around 2005. And we know 2007, Bob Levison goes to Iran. So anyway, that catches you up with Carter Page, a little bit more drill down. Then he's involved now in the last 6 years for the Center of National Policy. Well, this was really started by Zbigniew Brzezinski. They put it in Muskie's name because Muskie was a Secretary of State. Muskie was a Navy intel guy. But really, at the end of the day, this is a Zbigniew Brzezinski place. And the first person who's recognized is Madeleine Albright, of course, because it's her namesake. If you want to see where the Center for National Policy is, just down the street from Podesta Group. Now, what I want to say is Crossfire and Crossfire Hurricane now, two different things. You can have teams here, team of 12 here, team of 15, whatever, 2 teams of 12, doing Palantir for doing opposition research. You can see here over and over again, the subject of opposition research is coming up. And you can have these teams working without classified information, using just data sets that have been drawn off from classified data sets like NSA at Fort Meade. And they can work happily up until you're losing. And if you're losing on August 1st, you have a go decision to go Crossfire. And that's when the buses, I think, get into play. That's when you got to start taking people to, that's when you got to start loading people on the buses and getting to a classified location. I'm just going to say, I'll get back to that in a second. I'm just going to say it's to the Defense Clandestine Service, and it's their farm, which is out here in Camp Perry, which is out in Williamsburg, I believe, York County, Williamsburg, Virginia. But we can argue about those details later. But if you look at who, up until this point, Madeleine Albright on 14 July 2016 had never been in Cambridge before. Okay, so she's meeting all the Cambridge guys for the first time. She's meeting Halper probably here. She's meeting Mifsud. She's meeting Alexander Downer. She's meeting all the Five Eyes here. And guess who also happens to be at this crash seminar? You guessed it, Carter Page, the person that's worked closely for him ever since he really got out of college. So I think the metadata in this case screams opposition research. I think what ended up happening as far as these spies go are these teams were all doing opposition research, much like Fusion GPS. We just know the Fusion GPS opposition research better. We know Fusion GPS uses Russian spies, Veselnitskaya and Akhmechin, and the, Katsev and the Sherbank. We just know this opposition research team better. But they're similar teams. Downer has his team in Australia, New Zealand. Mifsud has his team in Malta, or Rome, Malta, or whatever you want to say it. Halper has his team somewhere out in Virginia. Maybe it's the Awans, maybe it's another group. We don't know. It just seems to be the Awans because that's where the old P-Tech team used to be. And then Dearlove has his Cambridge team with Christopher Steele. And, of course, Daniel Jones, maybe the Cozy Bears being here at the Senate. Feinstein kind of leading the group with Pelosi kind of reporting to her and the Awans kind of reporting to Pelosi. That's sort of the hierarchy as it starts emerging. The hierarchy is emerging. Now, am I going to get to the 150 that Thomas Paine talked about? We'll see. Maybe not. I think there's also Mike Flynn in here managing and actually the connective tissue between all of these teams is Mike Flynn. The problem is if I have an instance of Palantir here and here and here and here and here, we all have unsynchronized databases. This seventh person is the connective tissue. You don't want to put this stuff on the network. You want to take thumb drives from here to there to there. Really, and the big one is just getting the thumb drive out of the United States to the UK. From there on, you don't have any to worry about any US laws. So once you get it to London, you're good to go. And if you look at it, just look at the metadata. London to Washington, D.C. is the key route to get the teams coordinated and synced.